we can actually do things, much quicker, and we can do them much more efficiently. We don't have all the problems that we have out on site, and technology actually makes it easier for um, more people to do it, whether that's to become a developer or whether that's to actually become the builders. We've dropped things off on a Friday, and on Monday we'll get a picture from the people that we dropped it off, where they put it all up and it looks like a house. We say one of the most important things we deliver is momentum, because it's not just a pile of sticks out in your backyard that you have to go, spend the next couple of weeks cutting and measuring. It's actually, it starts to look like your end product very quickly.
Hi, Mark. Welcome to Steel Framing Connections podcast. Do you want to just introduce yourself and a little bit about your journey into steel framing?
Sure. Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me. We've been working with steel framing. I started about 15 years ago in the Middle East. We had a project in Abu Dhabi, had a particularly challenging structural situation, and there were a few Antipodeans kicking around that said, "Hey, you need to check out this steel framing solution," which I thought I knew everything there was to know about steel framing. I'd been in the business for 20 or 30 years at that point, but I didn't know about roll forming and CFS. So when we actually were introduced to it, I guess, yeah, that was about 2010, and solved a particular need of something very strong, but also very light, on that project. And when the GFC hit, we shifted gears a little bit, and we ended up developing a modular retail store. Just going back a little bit, my background is initially in big retail projects in airports around the world. So that's what my primary company was doing at the time. When we started using the steel, and then we were looking for things to do in the recession, we spun out a business that did modular retail spaces. And we did that for a few years. That was successful. So when I moved back to the States a few years later, about 10 years ago, was when we bought our first frame CAD machine, and we started rolling with the intent to do a lot of these mobile shops. And we ended up doing more small structures. There were some tiny houses that were made out of steel in Australia, New Zealand at the time. So we started to get a lot of those calls, and we kept saying no, that's not what we planned on doing, but we said yes a couple of times, and that was about 1,200 projects ago. So we've done quite a few small structures. Tiny houses led to smaller homes, and that's what we sort of focus on today. Is we send small home packages and kit houses out across the country, occasionally and internationally. But we've been using the system for about 15 years now.
Nice. And so whereabouts are you guys based now? And what's kind of your main focus area?
We're based in Austin, Texas. We roll in Dallas, and here in Austin. Our focus is small houses. So what we're looking to do is kind of take advantage of the all the advantages that go into framing something out of steel. So obviously, a lot of the conversations these days are talking about, why steel is better than wood. I think that's just half the conversation. I think that there's it's much more interesting because of what we're actually doing, and that we're using digital technology to build something, and we're not. I get to do things over and over again, so we've always come at it from a little bit different point of view. We don't like to say affordable housing. I don't think people want to live in affordable housing. They just want to live in a house they can afford. And here in America, where we're short, over 4 million houses, and we still build 1 million houses, but we're short 1,000 houses every day, and we're not catching up. So we look at the technology, as a way to simplify housing and to allow break down the barriers so that more people can actually build their own houses and become citizen developers. So that's where we're focused these days.
Are you guys building the houses, or is it, people buying the frames from you guys? And what size housing are you building?
It's pretty split. It's split pretty evenly. When you look at like the first 1,000 houses back when we were doing a lot of tiny houses and a lot of ADU small homes, we sent about half of those to DIY, people who were going to do it themselves, or with some friends, and then we sent the other half to contractors who, some were doing those on spec and some were doing those for somebody. But our customers were typically, we were sending out, preparing a package here in Austin and shipping it across the country. So we shipped all over. We've shifted a little bit because there's obviously people are happier most people want to buy something complete. So if it's within a couple hours, we do the assembly, the erection as well, and we do some building, but we from a Volstrukt point of view, we're a steel framing business. So we do, again, because we're focused on housing. There's some initiatives here in Austin that are unique where they've just changed the zoning. So we're doing some projects where there used to be one house, we can now put three houses. So we're turning that into um, housing packages so that we can, again, make it easier for a lay person or somebody who may want to do that in addition to what they do for their day job, that going out and building a house for either them or a loved one, or for purely as a developer, to make it easier for other people to get into the market and add housing, because ultimately our market, our industry just can't keep up with the amount of housing that's needed.
And is the demand for steel framing housing, or is it there's a demand for housing and then some people are looking at steel framing? Like, where's the market sit at the moment for steel framing?
We're still well and truly behind, obviously, New Zealand and Australia. I think that there's a lot of things that are changing. What was unique about tiny houses, steel framing was incredibly fit for purpose because it was lighter, it was stronger. All the benefits of steel worked very well for something that was getting driven down the road. Over the last few years, there was a lot of tiny house. We were on all the shows. We were very much a part of that community, and we still are. We still do, quite a few, but almost nothing was engineered. And we got into it really to kind of make that safer for people instead of it being a quirky little news piece at the end of the news. It was really dangerous what people were doing. They weren't using, the right trailers, the right framing. So we did that with a view to, fixing that. I've worked out of the country in emerging markets most of my career. And what we saw with the tiny house community was it was kind of the same thing. People were trying to come up with their own way to solve this problem because they couldn't afford houses. Pacific Northwest, you couldn't build anything, you couldn't afford anything. So they came up with this other way of doing it. And so we were able to kind of sneak steel into all these projects where because the great thing about emerging markets is that people are a lot more open to a new way of doing things. One of the biggest challenges we have in construction around the world, but particularly here in the US, is people aren't open to change. We spend very little on R&D. People want to do it the way they've always done it. Architects like to use the same details they've always used. Banks aren't interested in doing things differently. So there's a whole ecosystem designed around the status quo. So what we found by kind of finding that little crack and through these tiny houses was we had a very receptive, people could see automatically that it was better. So that's now changed. One of the things, obviously, there's a lot happening with climate. I see, the wildfires that happened out in LA. We're having a lot of conversations there. And that's been an interesting nexus because it's affected people that are in the entertainment industry. So you have the rich and famous over in Pacific Palisades, which is on these multi-million dollar homes. And you also have other communities that are more blue collar with the smaller homes. So it's two communities that, because we lose a lot of things to the news cycle over here. So it's hard for anything, disasters are on the news for typically a week or two and they go away. LA will continue to be in the news. And that's from an actual single family residential. It's 11,000 houses that got wiped out. Now it's a very big number. It's a small number compared to the houses that are missing across the US. Even, it's only 10 days worth of inventory. But it's very visible. You can see it, they get the cameras on it. When you're there, it is really heart wrenching. So what's happened out there with what's happening with climate, wildfires are more common here in the US. The HUD insurance companies, they've been pushing for steel for a very long time. That's because of termites, because of mold, and because of fire. So, but again, they're pushing against an industry that just isn't interested. So I think what's changed now is that it definitely feels more like we're pushing on an open door, because certainly when we're out in LA and it's, what started as everyone was very excited about it being, fireproof, fire resistant, part of these, these resilient systems. But then it also, that's changed a little bit now that's a year on from those fires because it's much faster. So where before it was okay, it's about fire, now it's about the time, and now it's, as that's moved on slightly as well. We're not all pulling from the same very small pool of carpenters because there simply are not enough contractors and subcontractors to build that many houses that quickly.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the trends are in the steel framing favor. What about just kind of the cost from like a lumber versus steel? Is that something that you notice as well?
Yeah, in about the first 2 minutes of every conversation. Um, yeah, it's been. I mean, obviously, wood's very volatile, so it goes up and down a lot. The first thing we have to overcome is within our own industry because architects and contractors or people like myself, we all know what steel framing is because been building commercial projects forever. So everyone automatically thinks that it's metal studs coming to site, 10 snippers, grab them, and you throw some drywall on it. And obviously that's not what it is. So I use that framing is an aluminum can. We're more like a soup can. We're structural. That's the whole fact that it is a design system. So that's the first hurdle that we have to overcome. And the next is that usually in America, the people that have steel framed houses are commercial builders. So they build their house out of steel because they get a better price from the trades. They're willing to pay the premium because they understand why it's a better product. But for a lot of the homeowners, everybody loves the idea until they got to that point where it was double. Well, it was double because you were pulling framers off of a commercial project downtown and asking them to come frame your house. So obviously with the roll forming with panelized systems, that's not necessary. But an architect and a contractor or someone that's looking to go get their house built doesn't understand that. So that's where we have to do a lot of education and coming in to explain to people. And we've sort of almost one of the reasons that we've moved into doing a lot more panel erection is because of that barrier. Because if I'm having a conversation with a contractor, it's not hard to kind of explain how steel is better. Yeah, you have the 3 seconds about thermal bridging, and that used to be a big deal. That's easy to mitigate. So those conversations have settled down. So then you're just into all the benefits of steel and how this framing system is better. Um, so when you're talking about that, if someone builds houses or condos, whatever it is for a living, they get that it's better. But when you because right now, let's say if we're at 20, say $25 a foot, and you can buy the wood at 23, it's like okay, we're a little bit more expensive, but we're better. Now, that depends on the market because just like, one of the other problems that we have here is it's a big country, so the pricing, on one side of the country is very different to the Midwest to the other side of the country. So, but when the pricing is, let's assume we're a little more expensive, and then what if I'm talking to a contractor, what he's going to hear is that it's a little more expensive. I get it's better. My guys have never used it. No, subs don't like things to be different. So where we used to say, we're going to send it to you, don't worry, anybody can put it together. It goes up very fast. What he's hearing is, I'm going to use my same guys. I'm going to pay them the same amount of money, which they're expensive and they've never done it before. So it's going to be slower. So it's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be better. We can go in and do the work. And, people like that. Obviously, we've done, one of the things about having done over 1,000 projects, it's a lot of repetitions. We work with, we know most of the guys that are rolling in the US, and there's certainly people that are rolling bigger projects than us. But we've got a lot of reps in. So that's actually, onboarding a client, working through a design, getting it out of the machine, shipped across the country, then getting it erected. So going from beginning to the end of every project, it's a difference between a golfer playing 12 tournaments a year and, so 12 times, 70 balls versus hitting 500 balls at the driving range every day. So we've got a lot of reps in. So, we've made all the same mistakes that everybody does, but we've made them on small projects and we did them a long time ago. So there's a lot more that we've learned and that we've evolved in getting those repetitions. So when we do assemble something for somebody, they know that it's, that our guys are very proficient. It goes up quick. We don't have the hiccups. And if there is something that's a little bit wrong, it's much easier for us. We're not afraid of it because it's because it's steel. We know, how to take things apart, put it back together. It's all very solvable.
You've referenced it a couple of times, but how important is that design-led process to Volstrukt and what you guys do?
Yeah, we push, I talk a lot about, my first degree's in architecture, and, I've been working in construction forever. So, I grew up with, we drew things with pencils and watched as I can remember whenever we all had to go and learn CAD, and that was a lot of work, and we had to go do that. And then eventually that became a benefit. And for me, it's ironic now because we're still doing things the same way we used to. The difference is instead of us drawing it in pencil, we're doing it on computer, but we still print it out as paper. So we still take that paper drawing, and the metaphor, or the analogy I use is it's you roll those drawings up and you throw them over a wall, and you hope that the contractor, you're going to go out to 5 contractors. You hope they read the drawings right. You hope you have everything in there that they ask the RFIs. Then you hope that the 5 subcontractors that they send it out to, you hope that they interpret the drawings right. And then, ultimately, when the contractor gets selected and sub gets selected, you hope that the guys, when they're on site, they actually read the drawings right and they frame that house correctly. So there's so many steps in there where you're just you're hoping. It's like playing whispers where, by the time it gets to the end, so that whole process, the architect needs to stay involved. You've got to constantly be making sure that the design is what the intent was. And so what we're talking to designers about is, this is, what is great about digital manufacturing. As you explain, digital manufacturing is there's 3 types. There's additive, which is 3D printing, as an example. There's subtraction, which is CNCing. Then there's formative, which is what we're doing with roll forming. So that formative, using that digital manufacturing, so I can, it's not immediate, but when I convey to a designer or an architect that what you draw is exactly what you get. It doesn't get changed. It doesn't mean, because when I was working my way through school as a framer, the first 2 days on a big residential project, all we did was measure how far out things were, because we needed the worst door or window to work down from, because you just had to, it's all about fixing this imperfect product that if it gets wet, it wants to turn back into a tree. And that's what a good carpenter does, is that you're actually, when you got to flip the studs and you got to do all that stuff, and you're, all the details that we're used to seeing, all the molding, all the trim, is all about hiding all those inconsistencies. So that's steel framing, and that the idea that, no, we're going to create a digital twin, just like that happens in manufacturing, where they take that file and they actually put that in the machine that's going to create the part. That gets us closer to actually solving a housing crisis, because we can actually do things, much quicker, and we can do them much more efficiently. We don't have all the problems that we have out on site, and technology actually makes it easier for, um, more people to do it, whether that's to become a developer or whether that's to actually become the builder. So, we've dropped things off on a Friday, and on Monday we'll get a picture, from the people that we dropped it off, or they put it all up, and it looks like a house. So, we say one of the most important things we deliver is momentum, because it's not just a pile of sticks out in your backyard that you have to go spend the next couple of weeks cutting and measuring. It starts to look like your end product very quickly.
And there's a few objections from the contractors or developers to start with, and then you've worked through that as the project's gone on, and then, next time it's a lot easier for them when they go to do another project?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges are, a lot of times, it's easier to say no than yes. So it's sort of how, where it's going to be on the client side. That's what's nice about, we're doing a couple of our own projects. And obviously, if you're, um, you know, when you call a contractor to build your project, if he's never worked with steel framing, then the first thing he's going to say is, "Nah, don't do that. It's going to be more expensive. The subs will hate it." It's you're always going to deal with that. So you want to be in the room. You want to be, we work with, we certify the builders, the subs, anybody who's worked on, on commercial projects, are, they're familiar. So the electricians understand, how to work with it, plumbers, all those things. But the other thing is that we do go a little bit further, maybe than a lot of people do with design because we're doing smaller projects. Yeah, we make sure that all the knobs are in the right place. We make sure that we understand, what the fixtures are going to be, so that we can make sure the spacing's right. We can, have the knockouts where they need to be. We can make sure that the lines are run. One of the things that we used to do, in the old days, when you're designing something, whether you're doing it on paper or in the computer, you're thinking through, you're building it all in your head and on paper in the computer once anyway. So you've already figured out that detail. So when that gets lost in the old way of doing it, or when you have to then go out and show someone on site that they've got to move those studs because now the shower valve is in the way, or the studs are in the way of the shower valve. Okay, everyone's very comfortable because it's wood, and everyone is a carpenter, right? Everyone thinks they can knock that out. Well, steel isn't any more complicated, but it does. We do a lot more to make sure that all that stuff is resolved up front, and then creating that digital twin so that when it comes out of the machine, it's right. Now, obviously, we've done hundreds of custom projects, and, custom always, has the opportunity for something to be not perfect. But the goal, and I think where ultimately that's where technology, AI, all the benefits of, that can come into the housing sector that is through repetition. That is through taking great design, turning that into something you can do repeatedly, so that it can be done, better each time. That's the difference between, manufacturing processes and things that actually are done efficiently and, can, really benefit more from AI and more from technology because of the repetition and because the inputs and the outputs are all known. So we have to get housing a lot more like that, a lot more like a product and less like a project. So, everything that we do in construction starts, ends, and then we start all over again. So that's what makes it tough for technology to really come in and be a big advantage.
So are you guys using a bit of AI through your workflow at the moment, and whereabouts are you using that?
Yeah, I mean, we like AI. I mean, obviously, I think that at the moment it gets used around construction. When people talk about AI in construction, I would kind of go, I think of it as concentric circles. And so AI works really well around it. So whether that's from a rendering and from a design point of view, that's the stuff that looks really shiny on TikTok. And someone goes, oh, look at this. Look how easy this was. It's usually not great design, but it's that first iteration. You go, oh, that looks legitimately. Now, all of my friends that are great designers would go, it's terrible. It's very difficult for it to get it to do what you want, but it's very good at, kind of giving you iterations. So on the design side, that's great because there is a lot of iterating, obviously from a QS and estimating, scheduling, there's all those things sort of, around the actual building that it does really well now. I think that it's not being used as much as it could be in our industry because I think that, I mean, we're at an interesting inflection point there as well because you have people that are my age who are sort of, kind of aging out of the industry. We sit across from a lot of people now who, their sons are now running the businesses and they're coming in and they grew up with a computer in their pocket and they're very much more tech savvy. So that, kind of is in everyone's favor as well. That that technology becomes people are if they're going to take over the family business, they actually want to they don't want to do it the way their dad did. They want to actually do it more efficiently. So, um, but I think that you have to have a reason. So you can everyone's trying to push the AI and buying the AI. I've been using it personally for I guess a little over 3 years, and it wasn't until I had a real need where, for me, I was doing a retail strategy for one of the giga projects in Saudi that time zones made it tough. So I was doing a lot of this stuff myself. And what I realized is I could take 30 years of, product, things that I've created over time, get it all in there. And I could spend a lot more time evolving and iterating on that and making, you know, really in a fraction of the time, I could turn out a much better product and I could spend my time evolving and kind of adapting, stuff that I've been talking about for a long time, so I could really do my best work. So, but until I'd done that and used AI in anger, for a real project, I hadn't really seen, that sort of like people worrying about, oh, my kid's going to use it, to write a paper on the Civil War. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not, but when you're actually using it and you're adding, you realize how much 80% of my time would have been writing that strategy document. I was able to just do that very quickly and then spend all that time actually adding real value. So, that at the moment, there's a lot of this stuff around the industry. Um, but until uh, we have to change a lot of infrastructure because where people are using AI, it's because there's a lot of structured data. We're doing, again, in our other business, where we're one of the largest retail delivery companies, or, it's a specialist project management for shopping and airport projects. And we've delivered, over 12,000 retail stores, for example. So we have a ton of data. So we have all our reports, all our drawings, all that. And we've written some software for that. We're developing some AI to create a design review tool. And one, we can use that internally because a lot of things that are, early days, they still need to be top and tailed by somebody who knows whether it's right or wrong. You still
Mm.
have to be able to see. And yeah, if you're just writing a paper on the Civil War, you don't know if they've got if the facts are right. If it's your content and you own it, and you're reviewing it, you're iterating it, ultimately, we have all the data to put in there, and it'll save a lot of time, and it'll be a much better way to do it. But you have to start by, kind of, it's if you don't have the data, and that's the big issue with with construction, particularly, in the US. It's so fractured. The average builder builds 10 to 15 houses a year, on the small side of projects. Even, the big guys are doing as much as they can, but everything's so fragmented, and those little guys aren't using a lot of structured data that they can plug into a model, to get that out. So that's why you're seeing it more in estimating and in project management, and those sorts of things. You see, that's where the manufacturing environments where you have a lot more, um, you know, the AI likes a factory floor. It doesn't like a muddy job site. So, where things look more like manufacturing, that's going to be better. But, you know, we've struggled in the construction industry. We've been trying since the 90s to kind of, with modular and prefab. Obviously, that's, the idea of panelized assemblies and all this is that's that's where it would be easier in those environments, but that's sub 2% of our housing industry. There's just not, those companies come and go all the time. We've worked with, if you're familiar with Katera at all, they were going to change everything. We were doing 9 projects with them when they imploded, and they had all the money, they had all the right ideas. But it's still, that ecosystem is still pretty challenging. So, getting the data, it's going to take a minute for construction to get there for sure.
You've kind of touched on a few ways we can do it, but like, how do you think we move everyone to this modern method of construction, steel framing? Like, how do we grow the pie in a way? Like, how do we get more people building this way?
Well, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to simplify the process. My view is that what technology is supposed to do, whether that's using TurboTax to do your taxes, that's a role that used to be done by an accountant. And it used to be, the tax code, particularly here in the US, is very complicated. So it was this murky world, and they kept it murky. So even if you had a very simple system, you had to use this professional, so that's actual software. So that software enables someone who, all the way up. Okay, if it's very complicated, you still hire a professional. So it didn't put CPAs out of business, but it allowed more people to do things for themselves. IKEA is similar. So IKEA uses technology, not software. They do use software, but they take really good designs. They simplify that. They use technology for everything from materials, manufacture, CNCing, the way things are assembled. They're doing all those things that in that factory setting to turn anybody into a furniture builder. And, in addition to, framing houses, I built furniture to get through college. And for me to build furniture, I had to have all the tools. I had to have all the experience. I could, to take a pile of wood and turn that into something, was very complicated. So, if you ask a room full of people how many people could do that, it'd be very few. But if you ask a room full of people how many people put together an IKEA cabinet, most of the hands would go up. So technology has enabled, that reduce those barriers greatly. So that's what we're doing. That's what we've seen with, it was we didn't mean to do that experiment with the tiny houses, but when we use that as a stepping stone to the ADUs. An ADU is a granny flat over here, but so zoning's changing all over the country here. So there's a lot more of these small, you know, um, living dwelling units in backyards now. So cities are pushing for that. And that's a project that people go, I think I can manage that. So that's sort of like the gateway, project for then going, okay, maybe I could build a small house. And so what we're going to do is, we're helping people. They don't have to build it with their own hands, but getting them to the point where, simplifying that, wrapping enough process around that to where here's a great design. This is every product you might need. I mean, in New Zealand and Australia's got a very mature kit house market. It doesn't really exist here. So that's a little bit of a shift. But, you know, AI is great at that. So all the things that used to be challenging, we would say, no, we can send you everything from the framing to the farm sink, to all the light fixtures, everything. People go, everything? You go, everything, everything, everything. So it was really hard for people to wrap their head around that I could get everything and I can phase that and I can manage the shipping. I can, everybody likes Amazon because they assume they're getting the best price because there's an algorithm. So if you can do that for your house and you could go into, I don't know, we have Home Depot here. Do you have Bunnies there? What's the equivalent?
Yeah, Bunnings is the equivalent.
Bunnings, yeah. So if you can walk in there and the only stuff that's on the shelf is the stuff you need for your project, that's a much easier trip. I normally take 2 or 3 trips when I do my weekend project. So it's there's places where AI, where we can get it deeper into the those concentric circles to where it's actually being part of the construction. So that's where, I've been enamored with the steel framing for a long time because that's I see that AI needs a single truth, and that's being able to have that frame be correct and the same time after time after time. That changes everything. If that's it's not just a better way to build, it actually is a way, when you envision, if you saw CES this year and you saw robots doing backflips and doing all this stuff, it's going to be a minute before those robots are walking through the mud. But once you get them onto a slab and once you get, we'll still have humans involved, but the actual screwing and clamping, and there's a whole bunch of things you could imagine, that technology being part of a home when you're using, a roll form system. You can't do that with, with wood framing. And we've seen lots of, Katerra tried, lots of companies have tried to, to panelize with wood. And it's just it's an imperfect product.
Is the increase in ADU demand, is that kind of the stepping stone for a lot of people to come across steel framing? Is that what you guys are seeing?
It's still, people have to stumble on it. So it's not the ADUs. No, I mean, there's no connection would be, there is for us, obviously, when we're talking about kits and things, it's an easy, people, they get it right away. But most of the ADUs, because similar to like the tiny houses and, these sort of, you get people coming in almost opportunistically because they go, oh, this is a simple, people like, tiny houses because they could build them inside a shed in the winter. And it was, it meant that they could build year round in the Pacific Northwest. They weren't necessarily maybe doing it for all the right reasons. And on the West Coast where ADUs, first started to really become more prevalent, you had builders who were, being, I don't know, I won't say predatory, like try not to upset my builder friends, but the pricing that was coming out for building these simple structures, was because we get people, when they call us, they've tried to call everybody a lot of times before us, but nobody will return your call if you're building something small. Here in the U.S., a builder makes about an average of $16 a square foot, for a house. That's based on a 2,000, 2,500 square foot house. So if I'm making $16 a square foot and you want to build 800 square feet or 400 square feet, it's like, again, going back to this, the supply and demand, the disequilibrium that we have in the housing market, I can build whatever I want because there's so much demand. So why would I build a small house. So it's very difficult to get a contractor or a subcontractor to call you back if you're trying to build something small. Because here in, we sort of get things, we talk about all this, oh, housing's not affordable. That's like, okay, the square foot cost per dollar per square foot is not the most clever way to price a house, but it does kind of work. Here in America, the um, you have the median income is around $80,000. If the house that you can afford or you get a mortgage on is three times that, that's pretty easy math. It's $240,000. So if you build $240,000, and that means half or more of the people in this country out of the 126 million households can afford that. But we don't build houses that size because contractors go, I can't make money. And there's regulatory stuff. There's other things, great place where AI is making some real inroads to reduce that, the red tape at the cities. But if contractors can't make money building for half of the population, then they're not going to, then that's a real problem. So if we just build smaller houses, people will have houses that they can afford. But we need an industry that's going to do that. So we've looked at that and said, okay, the industry isn't going to do it. So let's create, a nation of citizen builders. We're not necessarily going after the DIY market, even though, there's $8 billion worth of homes built every year in the US. It's a big market. But it's about kind of going, look, here's a way for you to manage this project or to feel comfortable because we're going to give you more pieces to simplify that whole process. So that's where, I think AI can solve a lot of that problems, give people that comfort. And that's where, only it all starts with, with the framing being perfect, because that's you can't turn a house into a product without the framing.
That makes that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for the chat today. Some really good information. If anyone's got any questions or wants to reach out to Volstrukt, what's the best way to get in contact with you guys?
Just through the website, info@volstrukt.com, or if there's a little bit of social media out there. So if they see any of the videos, or if they want to ask questions there, but we love questions because it gives us a chance to, there's usually it's more than a yes or no answer. So we love to see, we prefer them on social media because we get to answer to a broader audience. But we see this as an inflection point, so we think we're at an interesting time. So we want to be part of the evolution of the housing, switching over in this productization of housing.
That sounds awesome. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for listening to Steel Framing Connections. If today's conversation sparked a new idea, share it with your team and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. To explore the technology, people and projects shaping the future of steel framing, visit framecad.com. Let's reframe how you think about building.